how will trading partners 4 years to prepare for a second trade war react?
Yeah, so the first time they got caught with the shorts down, this time the shorts aren't down. They've mapped out all the supply chains for all the industries, and we tariff somebody, they're going to put a tariff on something that will hurt us.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to Northpoint of View, here with Dr. Walter Kemmsies. Walter.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm great, man. How are you?
Good, good. Yeah, I just talking about the stock market, so it brings back a lot of good memories.
We need to do, it won't happen today, but we need to do a series on our experience, mainly your experience in the market. It's fascinating. If you're in there long enough, whatever you're doing, you learn a few things.
Right.
Learn what to do and what not to do. Sometimes more importantly.
Yeah, exactly. Not to do. Like if Fred Morgan Stanley, don't wear suspenders unless you're a partner.
Yeah, I love that.
Many, an intern got sacked. They showed up wearing suspenders. Like, you're 19. What are you doing?
Not yet.
Ciao.
Don't move too fast. I guess the word that's dominated the news for the last couple of weeks has been tariffs.
Yes.
I said that the last one was going to be the shortest podcast that we ever did, 3 minutes, and I think it was 16 or 17 minutes. So I was going to say this might be the longest, but we'll break it up into bite-sized pieces.
That's right. We'll try to do it in one go, but if we can't, Han will just cut it in half.
Or by a third, or maybe cut it all the way. Just put it.
I didn't care.
Put it on the shelf, right?
Didn't meet my standards.
Yeah. So, 7 questions.
Yes. There are 7 questions you should be asking. If the tariffs matter to you in any way, shape, or form, there are very few answers. There's a lot of people on TV talking, and they're talking nonsense. I just want to say one thing. I will pick it up again later, but the fundamental mistake that a lot of analysts make is they know we are one country, but we are not one economy. You can aggregate the data and say U.S. GDP is blah, blah, blah. But no, and I'm going to give you 2 quick vignettes.
You talked about, I wrote that down from a conversation that we had a couple of days ago. Mm-hmm. And we could spend the rest of the podcast on that and get back to the tariffs on another one. But you said something that burned a hole in my brain when you said it. Mm-hmm. But it was comparing New York and Houston.
Ah, yes.
Right?
Exactly.
Remember that conversation?
Yeah. So let's go there. Let's go there for just a moment.
Yeah.
If we don't do the tariffs, we'll do the tariffs.
Maybe.
So Houston has more in common with Saudi Arabia than it does with New York.
Which, to me, if you just pause there, that's fascinating to think about.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
That's fascinating in terms of our economy, our country, but globalization, right? And the way the markets work and how they impact different parts of the world.
Right.
Right? The price of oil.
Yep. Oil prices go up. It's good for Texas, Oklahoma, Alaska, kind of California a little bit, and really bad for the rest of us. So New York has more in common with London than it does with Houston. Right.
Absolutely. The two, I guess, London and New York are the 2 financial capitals for the world. I guess maybe Zurich. I don't know. You know that.
There's like a dozen of them, but those 2 are the biggest.
Right.
London's struggling because with Brexit, everybody wanted to move stuff to Frankfurt, but it doesn't matter. It still is a huge financial center. You just don't move things overnight.
And at some point, I want to talk about the Texas Stock Exchange, but we'll talk about that. That's a different podcast,
my God.
Right?
It's just like we were going to have the Bitcoin exchange in Georgia.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, 10 years ago. Oh yeah, we should have the Bitcoin exchange. Just stop it. Look,
maybe not.
You're not New York, all right? Knock it off.
But the fact that New York has more in common with London than it does Houston. Houston has more in common with Saudi Arabia than it does New York. It just, when you said that the other day on our call, it broke the U.S. economy up in my mind into, I don't know, 30 pieces?
Yeah, well, my analysis, I came up with 7 sub-economies.
Okay.
I can't remember all of them, but it's been a few years. And there other economists have looked at this, but you have the financial economy, which is about 40% of our GDP. You have the energy economy, right? We produce a lot of oil, coal. My goodness, we got coal coming out our ears. You have the agricultural economy. You have the technology economy. You know, it's not just Silicon Valley. You know, yeah, it is a big part of it, but Pittsburgh is another Silicon Valley. And so there are other parts of the country that are more in common with Silicon Valley than they do with the rest of the stuff, you know. So,
yeah, when I think of Pittsburgh, I don't think of Silicon Valley.
No, you don't. And actually it is. You think coal, right? You think natural
steel.
gas.
I think, Three Rivers Stadium and the Steelers and the Pirates.
Yeah, exactly. You're not even there. And then you look at Carnegie Mellon, and they are the most advanced artificial intelligence research university in the world.
Wow.
And I mean, if I were a logistics guy and I was trying to really get automation to work, I'd put a huge distribution center right next door to Carnegie Mellon.
Heard it here first.
Yeah, exactly. Good opportunity for us. Hey, let's go do that. So you have to be careful. So the second key thing to keep in mind is that, I've seen a lot of people build macro models to explain our import demand and our export supply. Again, wrong. The buzzer goes off.
Gong show.
Exactly. You look at Georgia, right? We grow a lot of chicken and we export frozen, refrigerated. So does North Carolina with the pork and the chicken and Virginia. And we import corn, yellow corn number 5 from Brazil. Why? Because it is cheaper to get corn from thousands of miles away from Brazil. You know, you put it in a truck, put it on a ship, ship it over here, take it off the ship, put it on the truck and disseminate it. Cheaper than putting it on rail in the Midwest, a few hundred miles away and bringing it here.
It's mind-boggling.
It is. Well, the rail industry is an oligopoly, right? It has to be for many reasons, but it's an oligopoly and they have to charge accordingly. And what that means is we export corn to Asia through the West Coast, we import it through the East Coast. So now you have this big model of the economy that says we're going to be exporting corn, and yet the data shows we're importing it as well. So you have to be very careful with a lot of the nonsense you hear on TV. I mean, I heard somebody from the FT go on on the Fox News, I think it was, and it's like, you have no clue what's happening underneath the data down here on ground zero. I mean, you and I live in the bottom of the economy looking up.
Yeah.
And so the confusion is really bad. But let's just bear in mind that if, there's 3, I categorize goods that come from China in 3 buckets. Those where China has a 90% share of our imports, and it's hard to get away from China to somebody else. At the last bucket we get 10% of our imports from China and 90% from all over the place. And then you got the in-between. And a lot of the stuff that we can get from not China, including the second bucket, if we put a tariff on China and it becomes more expensive, we just get it from someplace else.
Right.
And what that is bad for the West Coast, because the West Coast is very Asia-oriented, and the East Coast ports are better globally connected. New York's the most connected, Savannah's number 2, then it's Norfolk, then it's Charleston. And the West Coast guys are way down on the bottom of the top 20 list.
Well, it reminds me of the truism about real estate, the truism about politics. It's all local.
Yes, it's exactly it. I mean, you can add things up to come up with a national total, but in the end, it's local. You know, and you taught me that. You've explained it sadly many times to me over the last 6-7 years that we've worked together. So let's go through what you need to. So all of these answers you're getting, oh my goodness, put your hands in your head, run away screaming. Okay, it's noise. So let's talk about the questions you should ask.
And what we'll have to do, we're at 13 minutes already. I feel like we just started the conversation.
All right.
Let's read through the questions quickly, and then we'll come back to the answers on another podcast.
Okay, exactly. Or how you might try to answer them. All right, so let's go through the questions.
All right. The questions provided to me by Dr. Walter Kemmsies.
Yeah. But you agreed to them, so take ownership, buddy.
All right, these are my questions now that I'm reading. What will Trump do now and down the road? You and I have done a good job over the last few years of staying out of politics, right?
Right.
It's going to be more difficult over the next, year. And in a lot of ways, conversations that I'm having, it's more polarized, but in a way, I don't know, there seems to be an alternate consensus that's building as well.
Well, it's true. Look, a lot of the things that he's going after are things that the majority of the country think need to be addressed.
Right.
Like the drugs coming in through Mexico.
Right.
Now, the way you handle
the style and the result
exactly
are two different conversations, right?
There was this boxer called Butterbean. I love him. He was the sloppiest boxer I've ever seen. But it didn't matter how sloppy. I mean, he'd flail his arms like a guy who'd never been trained. But when he connected, that was it. Boom, done, you're out.
Yep.
And so, to me, I think Trump is the Butterbean of American politics.
This is awesome. Han, are you hearing this right now? We got Butterbean,
President
Butterbean.
Exactly.
Well, just code. Nobody will know who we're talking about, right?
Exactly. And it's said with respect.
Exactly. I don't think he cares as long as he gets the views, right?
That's right.
As long as he gets the eyeballs.
He got mentioned. So, but yeah, I mean, we're not judging anything. It's just that he's done stuff now and he's going to do some more in the future.
Yeah.
And we need to be ready for the fact that more will be done. Whether it's good or bad doesn't matter. What matters is, are you prepared for that? Did you ask the question and say, well, how should I position myself in case something changes? Right.
Question number 2. What percentage of goods consumed in the U.S. can be manufactured entirely in the U.S.?
That's critical, because if you're like, well, all right, that's it. I've had it. I'm going to make my stuff in the U.S. You sent me an article once, Schlesinger, the French sport equipment maker. I may have got the name wrong, but it's something like that. They try to make all their tennis shoes in France. They redesigned it so that with 1/3 the components. And then they went out and they found out that nobody in France or even in the EU makes the little eyelets that you stick the shoelace through.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is ridiculous. So if you decide that you're going to make your stuff in the U.S., you better look very carefully at all your inputs and all your supply chains. It's very unlikely that you'll be able to do so.
Yeah, and that, you start thinking about commodities and some of those things, which is the reason, talk about Alaska and Greenland and other places.
Exactly.
What tariffs, be across the board or selective? Because
of the question we just asked, we need to know whether we're going to tariff the hell out of everything. So recently we talked about tariffing Canada, except for oil. We're not going to tariff the oil. Right. So that's what I mean by selective.
Yeah, for sure.
And if it's something we need, fine. The corollary to that is, and I'll be quick about it, back in the 2018, 2019, we were getting a lot of kitchen panels and very few kitchen cabinet doors. And then all of a sudden there was a crash of imported wooden panels from China for the kitchen, and a surge in kitchen cabinet doors because the doors were not tariffed, but the panels were. So the manufacturers just relabeled the HS code, the Harmonized System Code, and no tariffs. So there's a lot packed into that. That's why we have to do another tape.
Got it. How will foreign exchange rates move?
So the price of widgets that we pay for in yuan, it's $1 buys you about 8 yuan, and it costs 8 yuan to buy a widget from China. We put a 10% tariff on it. So now we have to pay $8.80 for a Chinese widget. But the dollar goes up by 10%. So instead of $1 buying 8 yuan, it buys 8.8 yuan. The price of the widget went from 8 to 8.8. Well, what changed? Nothing. So if the tariffs go up by the same proportion foreign exchange goes up in the same proportion as the tariffs, it's a wash.
Yeah.
There may be no effect.
Right.
And if you look at Chinese yuan dollar exchange rate, as Trump was likely to get elected, got elected, stepped into the office, the dollar is getting stronger and stronger against the yuan.
Right. Even if U.S. imported goods volumes decline, could there be winners and losers?
Yeah.
And how do we define that?
So, some things we get pretty exclusively from China, and so we'll just have to pay more. But there are a lot of things that we get from China, but we also get them from other countries.
Yeah.
And so the West Coast ports, who will, 50% of LA, Long Beach, 55% of their volumes are imported containerized volumes come from China. If suddenly a lot of stuff we're going to get from the other countries that also sell to us besides China, odds are they're going to come in through the East Coast.
Right.
The East Coast ports are better globally connected.
Yeah.
So West Coast, East Coast, winner. If you're on the East Coast, tariffs, we want more tariffs. Good for us. We'll get their business.
That's, through COVID, there were winners and losers. You
Yeah.
saw it. And it's painful. You're not certainly, when the market moves, to your earlier point, you just need to be ready to take advantage of the market move.
What do we learn in the stock market? Long the winners, short the losers.
Yeah.
If there's going to be a loser, you look for the winners.
Yeah. How will trading partners 4 years to prepare for a second trade war react?
Yeah. So the first time they got caught with their shorts down, this time the shorts aren't down. They've mapped out all the supply chains for all the industries, and we tariff somebody, they're going to put a tariff on something that will hurt us.
Yep.
It's funny, but I call it the fastener approach.
Yep.
Fasteners for the seatbelts are made by, I believe, no more than 2 companies in the whole world. And if they get taken out, it's kind of like what happened during the Fukushima, that horrible earthquake and tsunami. All these car parts that were made in Japan, suddenly you couldn't make cars because you didn't have the parts.
Right.
So it's the same thing, you can use this in reverse and you can use it to torpedo the U.S.
Yeah.
So we are very vulnerable, and I don't think we've got it as mapped out as the Chinese do. Project flow or no project flow under Biden, this can come back to bite us.
Will Chinese companies be able to continue using the Japanese companies' Reagan-Bush era playbook?
That's a good question. I think Trump is onto them. But basically, the Japanese companies, when they got 100% tariffs under Reagan, they started to do the final assembly in other countries, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, eventually China, the Asian tigers. And imports from those countries weren't tariffed to the extent that imports from Japan were. Japan went into a 25-year depression. Chinese companies, we predicted this in this series, the last 5, 6, 7 years, that this was going to happen with Mexico. It did. Mexico's getting a lot of Chinese investment. The big question becomes, how does the U.S. react to that? And I think we'll be okay with it as long as the Chinese company is a company and not an entity of the Communist Party.
Right. Which connects to the Panama Canal issues that have come up, which is another podcast.
Right, exactly. We've already kind of hit the limit here and beyond.
Walter, as always, great to be with you, man.
All right, buddy. It's good seeing you.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care. Bye.